Hello students and welcome back to the video series on Advanced Database Management System. This is Kiran Shinde, Assistant Professor IICMR MCA Pune. In this video session, we are going to discuss on our unit number 2, which is based on data modeling. So in this video session, we will talk on the ERD concept, that is entity relationship diagram concepts, and we will understand the concept of mapping cardinality along with the types of attributes. So let's start. So as I mentioned, first of all, we will try to understand what is an entity. Then we will see some notations in order to understand how to draw the entity relationship diagram. So let's start. So basically a database can be modeled as a collection of entities, relationship among those entities. Now, what do you mean by relationship? Very soon we are going to talk on that. But what is an entity? Entity is an object that exists and is distinguishable from other objects. Means an object having unique characteristics or unique properties with which that object can be differentiated from the other object. The examples are in front of you. Specific person, a company, an event, or a plant. This can be the different examples and in order to understand what is an entity. Entities can have attributes. Now, attributes are nothing but the unique properties or the unique characteristics of those entities. So here the example is people have names, addresses, like then company may have its own address, location, the number of employees serving for that particular company. So these are nothing but various properties, or I can say the various unique characteristics which are talking about that entity set. An entity set is nothing but set of entities altogether. So typically a company is an entity, but when we talk about group of companies, then it forms an entity set. The example is here: set of all persons, set of all companies, set of all plants or trees, set of students or set of lecturers. Okay, so these are all examples of entity set. Let's proceed. Here is an example: entity sets, customer and loan. Now we have considered here two entity sets. One is customer, and in customer entity set, you can see the various attributes which are mentioned, such as customer ID, customer number, customer name, and the street. Similarly, in loan, you can see the loan number and amount. The attribute names are a little bit messed up, but as I said, or as I dictated you, you must have understood. So in customer, there are four different fields which are mentioned, four different attributes which are mentioned. And in loan, you can see there are two attributes which are mentioned. So what do you mean by attribute? Just now I told you. An attribute is nothing but the unique property of that particular entity, with which we can understand exactly what is the purpose of that particular entity. So an entity is represented by a set of attributes, that is descriptive property which is possessed by all the members of an entity set. Means before some time we saw the example of company, which is nothing but an entity. When we talk about entity set, it is nothing but group of companies. So whatever characteristics which are decided or which are devised for that one company as an entity, it will hold true for all the companies. Okay, and that is why it will be called as an entity set. Similarly, here I have shown customer, loan. Okay, so these are the various examples. Now, what do you mean by domain? Domain is nothing but the set of permitted values for that particular attribute. It means when we talk about customer name, so the domain of that customer name is characters. When we talk about loan number or roll number of a student, then the domain of that particular attribute is what? Integer, because most probably roll number will not be in terms of characters. You have to use some number in order to designate a roll number, right? So the permitted values of an attribute are called as domain. Now we are going to talk on the various types of attributes, such as simple and composite, single valued and multi-valued, as well as derived attribute. What is simple and composite attribute? In customer entity set, if you understand, attribute customer ID is a simple attribute. It means it cannot be subdivided further. But when we say composite attribute, it means an attribute which can be subdivided into subparts. For example, customer name, it can be subdivided into first name, middle name, and last name. Similarly, we can have one more example, a PIN code. You know, like pin code has different digits, and every digit is signifying some location of that particular pin code, or that particular city, or I can say area, right? So these are some examples of composite attribute. Now, the other category which we are discussing here is single valued and multi-valued attribute. That attribute we have specified in loan entity, that is loan number, is a single value attribute. Similarly, roll number is also a single valued attribute. But when we talk about hobbies, or maybe when we talk about phone number of a person, of an employee, then that field or that attribute can hold multiple values. So such attribute is called as multi-valued attribute. Now, these are some more examples on composite attributes. You can see name and address. Okay, we have already discussed it. Now, the next category of attribute is null attribute. A null value is used when an entity does not have a value for an attribute. For example, if you are filling up some form, okay, and that particular form is maybe with respect to some kind of a policy which you are going to like open with some kind of a form. In that particular form, if you do not want to mention the dependent name, you can keep that particular field as vacant, okay, or you can keep that particular field blank. So such attribute is called as null attribute, okay, because it is not mandatory that you need to specify some value for that particular attribute. So in those circumstances, the attribute which is kept blank is called as null attribute. Other category of attribute, derived attribute. Now, as the name suggests, derived means the value of that attribute is derived from some other attribute. Then such attribute is called as derived attribute. Now, here I have taken an example, very simple example. Consider that employee entity set has the related attribute start date and employee length, which represent first day an employee began working for the bank and the total length of the time that employee has worked for the bank. Of course, what will be the output out of it? The start date and employment length will give you the number of years that employee has served that particular firm. Okay, so the number of years will be the derived attribute from these two attributes, that is start date and employment length. So these are some examples. One more example, profit is nothing but the difference between revenue and expense. So in order to find out the profit, you need to find out the difference between the revenue and the expense. This is one more example. Coming to the next topic in this session, relationship or relationship sets. What is a relationship with respect to entity? A relationship is an association among several entities. It means one entity set is related or associated with another entity set. Okay, so that kind of association is called as a relationship. Now here is an example. He is a customer or a name of the customer. Borrower is the relationship between Hayes and the loan. Now here we have mentioned that Hayes is a customer who has borrowed loan. The number of that particular loan is L50. So customer entity relationship here set loan entity. So a relationship set is a set of relationships of the same type. Here borrower is the example of relationship set. Why relationship set? Because here more than one customers are getting associated with these many more loans which are mentioned in the loan table. So it means there is a relationship set which is depicting many entities which are related with each other or which are associated with each other. Okay. This is the example. Like I said, that a customer has borrowed some loan, and with this particular diagram, you can understand maybe the person or the customer Jones has borrowed L17 loan, Smith has borrowed L23 as well as L11 loan, then Hayes has borrowed L15. So you can just see and understand. So this is nothing but the relationship between customer and loan. Now, let us talk on one more concept on the relationship set, that is recursive relationship set. Now, what do you mean by that? When an entity set plays a role in a relationship set more than one time, then it is called recursive relationship set. Since entity sets participating in a relationship set are generally distinct, roles are implicit and they are not usually specified. We will see one example for this. However, they are useful when the meaning of a relationship needs clarification. Like, just see or very popular ERD for making you understand what is recursive relationship set. Now here, if you see, there is only one entity set, that is employee. And there are three attributes which are mentioned: employee ID, employee name, and telephone number. Okay. Very soon we are going to understand the notations, like here employee ID is the primary key and which is mentioned with the help of underline. Okay. And of course, attributes are mentioned with the help of ellipsis, and entity set is mentioned with the help of rectangle. For relationship set, the diamond object or diamond notation is used. Now, here the main purpose is to understand what you mean by recursive relationship set. If you see, this employee is uh, participating in this relationship set as a worker, okay, and this employee is also designated as a manager for that particular firm. It means employee is playing two roles in this relationship set: one as a worker and another as a manager. So in such scenario, we say that this is recursive relationship set. Why? Because the entity set is participating in that relationship set more than one time. So that's the point related to recursive relationship set. Now, one more point related to relationship. A relationship may also have descriptive attributes. Now, what do you mean by that? Consider a relationship set depositor with entity sets customer and account. Now, we can have the access date as an attribute attached to the relationship set. Why? In order to specify the most recent date on which a customer accessed an account. So this is something extra information if you want to fetch. Then what we can do? We can associate an attribute to the relationship set, that is depositor. Now, if you see this particular example, there are two entity sets, customer and account, and you can see that the customer is associated with account with the help of this depositor relationship set. Means Johnson is a customer who is depositing some money in his account with name number A101. Similarly, Smith is depositing some money in account A215. Okay. Now, where this access date will be shown, I will show you one more diagram here. Just I'll go back. I think I missed out the diagram, no problem. So here what will happen is this access date, okay, this access date can be actually connected to the depositor relationship set. It means when we will form a table for this depositor relationship set, of course, why this table, I'm going to talk on this very soon. Just consider if we have a depositor table here, then we will have an attribute which is included in this depositor table, that will be access date. Okay. Now, why so, and in what circumstances the table of relationship set will be built, I'm going to talk on this in my next video session. The last topic in this video lecture is mapping cardinalities. Now, what do you mean by mapping cardinalities? Mapping cardinalities express the number of entities to which another entity can be associated via a relationship set. Means how many entities from one entity set, okay, are related or associated with the number of entities on the another entity set. That is depicted or that is signified with the help of mapping cardinality concept. Now, there are typically four types of mapping cardinalities: one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-one, and many-to-many. In every type, we can understand that how an entity in set A is associated with at most one or more entities in set B. Okay, we will understand this with an example. Now here you can see one-to-one. Okay, so here in set A, entity set A, there are four different records I have shown, or data items I have shown, and in B there are four data items. Now since it is one-to-one, every data item in entity set A is associated with only one data item in entity set B, and that is why it is one-to-one. But if you see one-to-many, one data item in entity set A is associated with more than one data item in entity set B. Such cardinality is called as one-to-many cardinality. Similarly, many-to-one and many-to-many, where you can see in many-to-many, more than one data items in entity set A are associated with more than one data items in entity set B. Okay. Now we will try to understand the constraints or the cardinality constraints with the help of example. Now here it is one-to-one relationship. A customer is associated with at most one loan via a relationship borrower. Now, of course, this is assumption. In the real-time scenario, we can have more than one loans in one branch, right? But here, just to make you understand, this example is considered. A loan is associated with at most one customer via this borrower relationship. So this is one more example for one-to-one cardinality. One lecturer heads one department. It means a person who is working as a lecturer in certain department, he is also serving the department as a HOD, and that department will have only one head of the department. So this is one-to-one. And one-to-many relationship, again, I have said that same example with other assumption, a customer can borrow more than one loan. So here one customer can borrow more loans, right? One department can belong, rather, I can say one department has many students, or one course has many students. Many to one relationship, many students belong to one department. So many a times it happens that once you understand one to many, it becomes easy to understand many to one. And finally, many to many. So here again, the same example, by changing the assumption, one customer can borrow many loans and one loan can be borrowed by many customers. It's like joint loan or joint account concept you must have come across. Okay, and there are many examples of many to many, such as I can take same example. One student can enroll for many courses. One course has many students who are admitted in that particular course, right? Then we can see there are many examples. Actually speaking, we can have example of shopping cart, that one customer can have many shopping carts, and then one cart, actually rather I can say one cart has many items, right? And vice versa, if you see that that item can be again in many carts, provided of course if there is unique ID, then the scenario will change. But these are some basic examples of many to many relationship. So up to this, we have covered three concepts, right? First, we started with what is entity, entity state, relationship, and types of attributes. And then we talked about the mapping cardinalities. Hope you understood. Stay tuned for my next video sessions.